Donald Trump won the election by the hand of God. Those were the words of Franklin Graham, one of the most influential Christian leaders in the US. That statement is, shall we say, debatable. But there's absolutely no debate that evangelical Christians, and especially white evangelical Christians, helped Trump win the presidency. According to exit polls, 81% of white evangelicals voted for Donald Trump. Not the most practicing of Christians, some might say. So why did they do it? Joining me in the arena to debate this is Jim Wallis, the president of Sojourners, a Christian social justice organization, and a former spiritual advisor to both Barack Obama and George W. Bush, and Eric Metaxas, the best-selling Christian author, radio host, and Donald Trump supporter. Thank you both for joining me on UpFront. Eric Metaxas, in the run-up to the US election, you wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal encouraging Christians to vote for Donald Trump, not for Hillary Clinton. Why did you and millions of evangelicals line up behind a candidate as unorthodox as Donald Trump, shall we say?
What do you mean by unorthodox?
He's not really a guy most Christians would opt for, given his record of lack of profession of faith, his personal life, bragging about sexually assaulting women, thrice married, public adultery, etc., etc. Formerly a supporter of abortion.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask you that is because the observation you just made makes a lot of assumptions about Christian evangelicals, Christians in general, that I think no longer can be made. I think that one of the good things that has happened in the world of serious Christians, conservative Christians, over the last 20 or 30 years is we finally understood that even in public life, the Christian faith is about grace and forgiveness more than it is about moralism, morality. This doesn't mean that morality and character don't count, but at the end of the day, Christianity is not a faith that is principally focused on one's sins, but on forgiveness and on grace.
Jim Wallis, he did receive staggering support from evangelical Christians. He got more support than people like George W. Bush, a born-again Christian, someone who was very proud and public about his faith. Do you agree with Eric's assessment?
Just to clarify to your audience, the most important word you said was white. White evangelicals. Evangelicals, black evangelicals, Hispanic evangelicals, Asian American, did not vote for Donald Trump. So white evangelicals did, I think because they were more white than evangelical. There's never been a racial divide like this in the churches. Black evangelicals said to white evangelicals. So you're saying you didn't vote for Donald Trump because of his racial bigotry, but his racial bigotry wasn't a deal breaker, a disqualifier for you. That's why there's such a gap here.
Eric, how do you explain the racial divide amongst evangelicals?
Well, first of all, I find that liberals talk about race a lot more than conservatives or moderates. They seem to be obsessed with dividing people up into racial categories, which I find wrong, to be honest, and unchristian, first of all. But secondly, I would say that the Democratic Party has taken African Americans and Hispanics for granted. They have not served them well. They've served them incredibly poorly over the last 40 or 50 years. And so a lot of people thought, I actually think Donald Trump would do better for them. And I think that that's a fact. And people know that many African Americans and Hispanics voted for Trump. People don't talk about that, but compared to how many voted for Bush and voted for Romney, that ought to be mentioned.
Jim?
It's not true. None of that's true. This is not about Hillary Clinton or Democratic Party.
Why not?
Evangelicals, black, Hispanic, Asian Americans voted overwhelmingly against Donald Trump. And you know, this is about protecting the most vulnerable. And Matthew 25, which isn't liberal, it's in the Bible, the words of Jesus. Our principal goal in public life and for government is to protect the most vulnerable, the poor and most vulnerable.
It doesn't say for government.
It includes everything in our public life, including
That's a sloppy and wrong-headed interpretation of the scripture.
I'm sorry, it's not sloppy or wrong-headed. It's what we are holding governments accountable to. The prophets in the scriptures all say governments. They say governments, kings, rulers, are going to be held accountable.
Okay, Eric, as you voted for him as an evangelical, did you not feel repulsed by some of the stuff he had said, some of the stuff he had done? In a way,
There's no question. There's no question. Obviously, I felt See,
so did you vote by holding your nose? Did you vote reluctantly? I'm just wondering what your personal approach was.
Well, yes, I said that my support was tepid, but people don't really believe that that can be possible. The fact of the matter is this. Hillary Clinton was so frightening to so many people.
So he was the lesser of two evils. That's your view.
Yes, to some extent, yeah. Everyone is the lesser of two evils. Everyone has good and everyone has bad. And we, as mature citizens, hopefully, are obliged to make
Many would argue, as you know, Eric, there's never been a candidate like Donald Trump. There's never been a presidential candidate caught on tape bragging about sexual assault weeks away from the election, which turned a lot of evangelical leaders off him.
Everyone in public life has said and done things that would turn off anyone. At some point, you're forced to make a decision. In the case of Hillary Clinton, her standing up for her husband, who everyone actually believes really raped people. People see a double standard, and they're tired of it. People don't talk about that. And I think that there was an anger because of that double standard.
Jim, briefly.
11 million undocumented people in this country. They're churchgoers, they're pastors, they're families. Do you want to, as Donald Trump has promised and threatened to do, deport 11 million undocumented people?
I don't see it. Do you see him doing that?
He is deporting more and more people all the time who are
so
family.
Silly.
It's not silly, it's facts.
I'm depressed. I'm depressed by the dialogue.
Eric, these are facts of what he's doing to poor and vulnerable people.
Okay, we're running out of time, so I just want to move on to quite an important issue that we haven't talked about. Abortion. Abortion and the Supreme Court nomination. Eric, many would argue that you said at the very beginning that evangelicals have moved on. You know, judging people's personal character is not the deal breaker when it comes to voting. The polling suggests there's change. I think 30% of white evangelicals said in 2011 that an election official who commits an immoral act can still, do their job. Now 72% say that. Many people look at that and say that's just evangelicals being cynical. They want to stop abortion. They want to get a Supreme Court nomination, and it doesn't matter who gives it to them. Even if it's someone as flawed and as amoral as Donald Trump seems to be, we'll back him as long as he gives us our Supreme Court justice.
Well, you can make it sound cynical. And I'm sure that there are some people who are cynical. I hope that I'm not cynical, but I am pragmatic in the sense that I think that killing unborn human beings is a deal breaker. It is something that we will be held accountable for by God as a nation. And it seems to me that it's just like slavery. When something you know in your heart is wrong, you want to do anything you can to help people wake up. And I think by appointing Gorsuch or whomever, you will at least get it pushed back to the states so that American citizens can vote on it, rather than the Supreme Court finding some ridiculous place in the Constitution where they claim
Eric,
there's a right to an abortion, which most lawyers say there's not.
Hold on, Eric. A lot of people watching, including a lot of women watching, will be deeply offended by your comparison of abortion
None
and
of
slavery.
those women were aborted, you'll notice.
Let me finish the question. A lot of people will be offended by your comparison between abortion and slavery. There's three men here, so I have to make that point.
I'm offended that they're offended.
Okay, and number two, they would also look at you and say you are being cynical, because you're saying, here's a guy who's accused of sexual assault by a dozen women, and you're saying, no, that's not the deal breaker. Abortion's the deal breaker for me. I don't care what he does as long as he stops abortion.
No. Again, see, the point is that if you really want to know what people think and believe, you have to give them an opportunity. What the media tends to do, and what you're doing now, is you're trying to force people into saying, yes, I'm cynical, this is all I care about. People are much more complicated and nuanced than that. So there's 100 things that cause us to vote or not vote for someone. You have to take them all into consideration.
So
but
abortion
I will say
wasn't
this
the top
again.
issue?
Think about what it was. What about corruption? I mean, I think that people were fearful, genuinely fearful, if Hillary Clinton got in office, that she would be so corrupt that she has sold her soul.
So they voted for a guy whose family business is now intertwined with the U.S. government.
I don't believe that Donald Trump cares about his business at this point.
I'll let your listeners decide who they think is more corrupt, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. I won't give the pro-life issue to the far right like Mr. Metaxas. I voted against Donald Trump in part because I am pro-life. Not just pro-birth, but when children come out of the womb, if they're poor, if they're vulnerable, if they're black, Donald Trump is destroying their lives. Pro-life means, and Pope Francis has made this very clear, pro-life is not just about abortion, it's about how we treat the poor, how
Jim,
we
I
treat
agree with
all
you.
of life.
I totally agree with you.
The fact is, Donald Trump's promises and policies are aimed at the people Jesus taught us, and in the text it says says nations, Eric, nations, to
Yeah.
protect. The policies that Donald Trump is supporting and are being promoted in the Congress by many of his allies are taking health and life and food and heating and survival
Okay.
I
away from the
respectfully
poor
disagree.
people. Well,
I respectfully disagree with you.
We disagree
Eric.
that ideology is not going to save us here, but Scripture will.
Eric, are you worried that he's going to let you down at some stage, given his previous clear lack of support for evangelical Christianity?
No.
You have absolute faith in Donald Trump?
I don't say I have absolute faith, but am I worried? No. I think listen, I am obliged as a citizen and as a Christian to hold his feet to the fire just as I would have held Hillary Clinton's feet to the fire. But that doesn't mean that I'm sitting around wringing my hands. As far as I can see, he has done reasonably well, and I have no reason to believe that he won't continue so to do.
Gentlemen, we'll have to leave it there. That's our show. Up Front will be back next week.